5 times. 15.
It is great to be here with my fellow speakers. Susan and I are old friends, and as you will see, she actually was present for many of the events that I'm about to recount, so you can check with her later. There was a period starting around the mid-1990s over which I was asked to be best man 5 times. This is true. This is before Craigslist, so I really was popular. Now, the problem is most of those marriages didn't work out too well. In fact, one of the few that did was the one where I was leaking spinal fluid and I couldn't stand up and I didn't make it to the wedding. And so they were able to exchange wonderful love and nuptials without my obviously toxic presence. And so their marriage is flourishing, which is very nice. I'm sure you can send them cards. And so along the way, the last of these 5 best man jobs. One of them actually was for somebody that I literally barely knew, and that was a very tough toast. But the last one was from my dearest friend, Josh. And it came sort of right about 2001, and he called me up, and he had a long, wonderfully rich history as a bachelor about many towns. And he called me up and asked me if I would be best man for him and Christine at their wedding, and I immediately leapt into it, and I said, of course I will. You know, it's something I do, you know, best man. It's just a side business, really, but I would be delighted, and I was so thrilled for him, and then as the conversation wore on, he told me the details, and I hung up feeling very full in the chest, and I went back to the back of the apartment to see my wife, Alexandra, who's here, and I told her that Josh was getting married, and she was ecstatic and surprised and all sorts of things. She said, well, where is it? And I said, it's in Ronda, Spain. And now the thing about Alexandra is when she was 8, her parents were in a horrible car crash. And it was just terrible, really. And her father was in a coma, and 6 months she had to move over there. And anyway, they got through it, but she never, ever wanted to go back to Spain. She's also not a very good driver, I'm sorry, but it's true. And so she was never going to go back to Spain. And then I said it was in Ronda. And she didn't want to go. And then she said, well, what else? And I said, well, Josh mentioned something about, you know, how he and I, because I was the best man, we might do some bullfighting after the wedding. And, you know, and there was a long pause. And the truth is, when he said it, I mean, first I thought he was joking, and then I realized he wasn't. And then because we were caught up in the whole atmosphere and I didn't want to be, you know, a drag on that, I didn't say anything. I said, oh, that sounds great. You know, bullfighting. Love it. And so the truth about Josh and I had grown really close. We had known each other in college, but we had lived in Paris for a couple of years at the same time, from ages 24 to 26. Very bonding time. Especially after, you know, I stole his girlfriend, then he stole her back, and various other things, but it was very bonding. And we are still incredibly close friends. And then before that, or after that, he had lived in Spain for 5 years. He was a big media bigwig, he still is. And he speaks perfect Spanish, absolutely beautiful Spanish, and he had been totally embraced by the Spanish people in Madrid, and he fell in love with the art of bullfighting, tauromaquia, as he used to say, and he kind of got all into it, and he actually became friends with Antonio Ordóñez, who is the greatest bullfighter pretty much who ever lived in Spain. He's the only bullfighter ever to be inducted into the Spanish Institute of Fine Arts. His method of bullfighting was considered a work of art, and he comes from the greatest lineage of bullfighters in Spain. Now, I mention this because he had brought Christine, who is Josh is a rather short, very good-looking, wonderful guy, but rather short Jewish guy from Beverly Hills, and his wife, Christine, ex-wife, sorry, but it's true. I jumped ahead. And his ex-wife, Christine, was like 5'11", Norwegian. Her mother was like 6'1", just total Norwegian Viking stock. I mean, the whole family is like, you know, extras from Vikings, the new show, which you should see. So that was, and Ordóñez, he had brought Christine to Ronda, where he had always come for the great bullfights in September. And Ordóñez, just as he was dying of cancer, one of the last things he ever did, he blessed Josh's and Christine's marriage, and he proposed, and so it went. That's how we ended up in Ronda. And I brought Alexandra, who really, to her great credit, did come. I don't think she had any idea what was ahead of us, but then neither did I, and that's the beauty of life. And so we arrived in Ronda some months later. This is about 12 or 13 years ago. It was raining, which was a good sign, because there'd been no more talk about the bullfighting ever since this mention of it. I mean, he just never really mentioned it. There was many other things to do, a whole bachelor party I had to throw for him, during which I had to listen to all the liaisons he had ever had, including how he had stolen back the girl that I had stolen from him, which I didn't even know until I'd paid for the dinner. And finally we get there, and it's raining, and I keep wondering, is there really going to be bullfighting, or is this just, one of those things? And it's raining, and we drive into Ronda. Alexandra is very tense. I mean, it's Spain. It's just not she feels it's a bad place where bad things are going to happen. And I'm a glass half empty guy, really, but I was trying to be very chipper. And it was raining. We drive by one of the most beautiful bull rings in Spain. It's very famous, I was told, in Ronda. And as we drive by in the rain, and it's this sort of wet, khaki color, you see the bull ring. And outside it are two matadors. It's Antonio Ordóñez and his father. Now, his father was gored in the ring, and it turns out that almost every one of their relatives was gored or trampled to death in the ring. And Ordóñez dying of cancer was almost like, it was like the easy way to go. It really was considered very almost luxury to die of cancer instead of being gored or trampled like the rest of them. And they're out there, they're bronze statues of them. And the first thing I noticed, I'm sorry, but I mean, you would too, is how tight their pants are. It's a little bit like seeing those old pictures of Rick James. Do you remember that? The red leather pants, and then this thing going down the leg. And, I mean, these are the bullfight. These are the men among men in Spain, and you can't help but notice how tight the pants are and everything else. So we're driving by, and I don't remark on this because I'm a private person, and we drive by, and we go to the Parador, which is this beautiful hotel overlooking this vertiginous gorge that separates old Ronda from new Ronda. Now, there are a few things about Ronda that I come to understand. One is that this is going to be the first Jewish wedding in Ronda since the Inquisition. It's true. The other thing is that this is most certainly going to be the first wedding in Ronda where the godfather of the groom is black. And this is Berry Gordy, the founder of Motown Records. In Barry's estimation, I think he was the first black CEO in Ronda since Othello. So there are just a few things, and Josh is a real celebrity in Ronda. I mean, he really is. He's brought the whole thing together here. It's a full production, and everybody loves him, and he's a wonderful guy. He speaks this beautiful Spanish. So we come to the Parador, and I see Josh and Christine, and they look great, very stressed and radiant and thin. And, there were a few signs that things might not be going that smoothly. One is he handed me some Xanax and told me to carry it around no matter what, just in case. The other thing was the wedding planner, who was this cute little blonde, who was an ex-girlfriend of Josh's, it turned out, and was just sort of floating around. And then at the rehearsal dinner, one of Christine's ex-boyfriends, who seemed like a crazy Norwegian, had somehow infiltrated the gathering, and his present to them, given in public, were two Viking helmets with the horns, which in Italian means you've been cuckolded. And they made them wear them. Now, it looked good on Christine. It was a little tight on Josh, and he looked very uncomfortable. But that said, so we had a couple of days before the wedding, and it kept raining and raining, and the prognosis was that it was going to rain all the time, and I felt very calm about that. I really thought that was just going to be how it was, and there was no more talk about bullfighting. There was so much to do, we didn't really have enough time to talk about it, and so all was fine. And I kept saying to Alexandra, see, Spain is just like any other place. It's just like any other place. It's just great. Love these people. And, we had lived in France. We didn't have Spanish. We spoke French, but not Spanish, and there was just a slightly different vibe. So Josh and I are going all around, running around doing things. I meet the mayor and his wife. I meet all the dignitaries. He says, there's this old little guy who's always hanging around, who comes up, And Josh says, this is El Cronista, the chronicler. So he's the storyteller of Ronda. He's a very important guy. And he says, El Cronista wants to take us on a tour, wants to take you on a tour. And I said, okay, all right, I don't know Ronda, that's fine. And Josh said, I'll come with you. So the three of us, El Cronista and Josh and I, set off in the rain to wander around old Ronda. The problem is Josh is on his phone, so he's on the phone talking about how many countries he's going to sell Friends in and various other shows. And I'm with El Cronista, who is talking only in Spanish about the history of Ronda. And every so often he turns to me and he says, sí, no? And I say, sí, no. And it goes on like this. I believe he told me why all the buildings were white and various other things, and it went on like this for about an hour and a half. And then we have to move over to Pedro Romero's, which is the bullfighting restaurant in town. And it's covered in bullfighting memorabilia, most of which seems to involve people getting gored or killed. And there I have to listen to all of Josh's exploits again. And so we make our way to the wedding. The wedding is beautiful. I get through my toast. It's fantastic. It's 3 in the morning. Marvin Gaye is playing. We're all drunk, dancing. We've done the hora with Christine's mother, who's 6'1", up on the chair. Okay, we're dancing the hora, and Barry Gordy's dancing the hora. And our friend Philip von Stauffenberg, the descendant of the guy who tried to kill Hitler, is shouting, "Shalom, shalom!" And the whole thing is going like that. And I'm just thinking, I'm loving life. And all of a sudden, Josh grabs me in the din and the darkness, and he grabs and he pulls over this incredibly smoky-eyed Spaniard. And he says, shouts in my ear, "This is Cayetano Ordóñez. He's going to lead the bullfighting tomorrow. He's a grandson of Antonio Ordóñez. Most of his family were gored in the ring." What are you going to say? Seriously. I look at this guy. He's got topaz nuggets for eyes. He's incredibly handsome. His pants are tight. He's got dark curly hair. And he looks at me and he says, "So, best man, tomorrow you fight bull?" And Josh yells, "Absolutely!" And before I can say anything, there's a conga line of crazy people going by, and we get thrust into it, and I look back in time to see his look. And his look is very clear, at least in my opinion. It says, "Best man is not Matador. Best man is Barry Manilow." We go to sleep about 6. We wake up somewhere around 11, drunk still. I'm thinking, nothing. It's over. Everything's gone well. My friend is married. The sun is shining. There's a tour bus parked outside the Parador, waiting to take us all, not to the big, great, beautiful bull ring, but to a rundown finca outside of town. We get dressed. We go over. I'm standing by this sangria bar, waiting. Alexandra says to Josh, "If anything happens to my husband, I will kill you." Josh looks concerned. She asked me if I could set a little sperm aside in a glass because we've been talking about having a family. And I have to tell her that actually, under the circumstances, it's not really probable. About 20 of us walk behind to the bull ring. They're standing there, 4 bulls. Now, these are considered small bulls, 5 feet tall, 500, 600 pounds. They're incredibly quick. I'm told a story about how one of them killed one of the most famous bullfighters in Spain because he was so quick, he upended him and broke his back. I'm thankful for this story. We stare at this bull, who stares back. He seems enraged for some reason that I don't understand. We're led into this bull ring. It's about 100 feet across, dirt and sand, 8-foot-high crude stone walls, and on each side, about a 5-foot-high barrier of plywood, very, very cheap, about 5 feet wide. We're told to stand behind these barriers. So we pack about 5 of us in at a time. I'm next to Josh. We're right across from the gates. We're standing there, and it's very quiet. All of a sudden, there's a clang as one of the bulls kicks the doors, and then the doors open, and there's silence. And then this bull, like a locomotive, comes like about 35 miles an hour, comes pouring out of this gate directly at us. And we're just standing there. And literally, about 1 foot before ramming into our barrier, it turns, and it begins to circle. Now, there are these old fat guys wearing fuchsia silk and toupees, whose job it is, I think they worked at my boarding school, actually, as security guards. His job it was to wave a little hanky occasionally if the bull looks like it's going to cause trouble and have the bull go for them. They do some waving, the bull takes a few turns, and then Cayetano appears. He's amazing. His eyes are even more smoky. He's incredible. But then the bull turns and upends him and begins to almost trample him. And you can feel the humiliation coming off of him. He comes from the greatest bullfighting family of all, and in fact is now one of the great bullfighters in the world. But I think this was his motivation. So he gets out of the bull and he does a couple more passes, but in front of the crowd he's done. And then it's Josh. Josh takes a small cape, the red one with a sword in the back as a baton. And he starts waving the cape and he does a couple of turns. He looks terrified. And then once he does a couple of passes, he looks incredibly confident. And then he begins to play to the crowd. And he sees the bull at the same time and the bull sees him. Now it's like an isosceles triangle. Josh is here and the bull is here and I'm here behind the barrier as they begin to sprint at the same time towards me, because the bull has seen what Josh is doing and he doesn't like it. Josh arrives about 1 foot in front of the bull. I feel a riffle on my side, and it's the sword that has just buried into the wall. It has literally took a part of my sweater off, and we just look at each other for a long time, because that's what friendship really is. And then Cayetano appears and says, "So, best man?" And Josh, who obviously feels guilty, suggests that we bullfight together. So we take a long cape, about the 4-foot kind, and we stand out there, and the bull is standing there, urinating prodigiously and heaving and snorting. I actually feel like urinating too, but I don't say anything. And I hear the crowd starting to chant, "Give John more cape. Give John more cape." And I look down, and Josh has gathered about 90% of the cape in his hands, and I just have a pink loincloth and then my legs. And I grab it and I say, "Give me that." And when I grab it, the bull charges. So the bull charges between us, and I feel it cross my leg, literally feel it brush against my leg. And I fall down and I stand up because you levitate, and we do a few more passes before we back our way up and are hauled out of the thing, and we will be followed by many people who are trampled delightedly, and so it goes. And I will say this about the whole thing. We came back. We have never been to Spain again. I find it hard to look at fields of cows, or even to wear pants that are too tight. But sometimes, I will say this, it's 12 years later, we have a son who's 7. I sit at my desk writing about things that happen in Africa or New Jersey or wherever it is, and I think, what about Ronda? What about that? I feel that little brush against my leg again. And I think maybe we'll all go back. Maybe we'll do it again. Or, thinking more about it, maybe I'll just carry this with me for the rest of my life, like some small, messy, preposterous sack of treasure. Thank you very much.